A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
As politicians, media figures, celebrities and healthcare professionals debate the issue of gender change in Australia, there is a very real and human face to this issue. The faces of those who journey down the path of gender change. And sometimes these faces are young. Too young to legally drive a car, vote in an election or buy an alcoholic drink. And yet in some cases, young people have been given the choice to change their birth gender. Today, we're so privileged to speak with one such person. Her name is Chloe Cole, and she joins us in the studio now. Chloe, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Chloe, for our listeners who've not heard about you or seen you, can you tell us your story?
So I went through the process of a medical gender transition while I was still under the age of 18, between the ages of 12 to 16. And I am a detransitioner, meaning that I came back out of it. And I speak on behalf of my story, having gone through all this and against the current standard of care that there is in place for these kids and these young men and women who are confused and struggling with trauma around their birth sex.
Yeah, so now you see yourself as an advocate to speak up for young people who are being exposed to this?
I do. I consider myself an advocate for the rights of children to grow up with their bodies fully intact, and to a full adulthood, and to the parents for having the best possible outcomes for the child.
Yeah, sure. Now, to our listeners again who've not heard about you or seen you, you've got an accent. So tell us what your background is, Chloe.
I'm from California, actually. I'm from the Central Valley. I'm not quite in the palm trees and movies area of California. It's more, it's a little bit more rural. It's a little bit more like farms and cows and orchards. I like it. I love it.
Yeah, I do know California's got a lot of citrus, and also they grow grapes, they make wine.
Lots of almonds mostly in my area.
Oh, really?
Yeah, mostly almond orchards.
Oh, there you go.
It's beautiful when it blooms in the spring.
Uh-huh. And were your family involved in agriculture? What was your mum and dad doing?
Not really. So my mom is a nurse and my dad mostly works in IT. And I have a bit of a military background as well. I was never in the military myself. But I have brothers who are in the Navy, and as was my grandfather. So
Yeah,
I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, good for you. So you're a Californian girl and you're growing up and with mum and dad in this sort of semi-rural part of California. What happened, Chloe, to make you want to change your gender?
So I had always kind of been an awkward kid, a little bit of an oddball, and I felt from a very young age that I was different from the kids around me. And I was a bit of a tomboy. I felt like I associated better with the boys around me, especially the older I got, and as I went into my middle school years. I just found them easier to interact with. They were funny. They were just more fun to be around, and I felt like in terms of my sense of humor and the things that I liked, I was just a lot more similar to them. And I didn't really feel like I was super close to a lot of my female role models growing up, more so with my older brothers, I think. And I really looked up to them, but I was sort of like in the middle of being like a stereotypical girly girl and a tomboy. And there were times when I didn't always feel comfortable with things that were traditionally feminine, things like dresses, skirts, purses. Oftentimes when I tried those things on, it felt like I was kind of forcing myself into it and that it wasn't really fitting for me. And I had always kind of been a bit of an artist as well. I was very eccentric. I tended to sort of think outside the box, and it was very hard for me to integrate socially with my peers in general, and especially the girls around me.
Yeah.
And I also went through a bit of an early puberty as well. I was about like 8 years old when my breasts started to come in, and just all the attention from it was very difficult for me to deal with, and it always felt like I always just wanted to be somebody else.
Yep. So how did the message get to you that there was an option that you could actually change genders? Do you remember the time you first heard about that?
Well, I'd heard about it through I think I'd overheard like adults talking about it, or like sometimes seeing mentions of it on the internet as a kid. But I didn't really, I didn't really care much for it until I started using like personal social media, like Instagram, when I was about like 11 or 12, around the time that I got my first phone. And it was just, I wasn't like reading out about it through the lens of like a celebrity transitioning or like an influencer. It was like other kids my age who were talking about their struggles with their body image, with fitting in, and a lot of the same things that I was going through as a kid. And I felt like I related a lot to these people, and more I started to feel like maybe it's the exact same with me. Maybe I really was supposed to be a transgender boy, and I have the brain of a boy who just so happens to have the body of a girl.
Yep.
And maybe this explains who I really am, and it's the answer to my identity.
Yep.
Which is something that I'd been struggling with from a very, very young age.
Yep. And we're talking, you're about 11 now when you get these thoughts?
About 12 years old, yeah.
About 12, yeah. And so what was the thought, or what was the reason that really got you over the line as far as, you know what, I'm going to do this? Like, what really appealed to you most about undergoing the gender change?
I mean, it felt like it gave me an explanation for who I really was. I didn't really understand who I was growing up, and I was struggling so hard just to be able to find myself, to feel like I could be comfortable in my own skin, and like I could be somebody to the people around me.
Yep. And so you're in California. Every state of America's got its own laws. Australia, we've got our own laws as well. So was there any obstacles in California to a 12-year-old girl going down this path, or has the legislation in California really enabled young people to make this choice?
I mean, California really kind of is the forefront of this issue in the United States. It's one of the states that's really pushing this. And there are a lot of laws that are enabling this to happen to kids younger and younger. And there really were no, other than having my mom and dad sign off on the physical treatments, there really weren't any major roadblocks. It was just like almost like a straight pipeline in.
Amazing. And what about your mum and dad? Like, when you first went to them and said, hey, I want to do this, what was their response?
Well, they were very conflicted because they could see that I was struggling and I wasn't happy with myself, but they didn't want to feed into that unhappiness. They weren't really sure how to approach this because this is something that they never really dealt with any of my big siblings. But they knew that it was a mental health issue, so they decided to get the help of a therapist, and they didn't want me to go down They didn't necessarily want me. They didn't want me to go down this path at all. Especially the medical parts of it. They just wanted to allow me to be a kid, to be a tomboy, to express myself as I pleased without really any medical intervention.
Yeah.
But the doctors told them that there was no other choice for me. That this was what I needed. That it was a part of my identity, and if I wasn't allowed to go down this path, then I would be at risk of suicide.
Oh, man.
They made use of the high suicide statistics within the transgender community to basically convince my parents that I was going to die. That was life or death for me if I didn't have these treatments.
Wow.
But I wasn't suicidal at all. I was in a great deal of distress, but I didn't want to die. I just wanted a better life.
Yeah. So there was real pressure then from the medical professionals in California who you were interacting with to your parents to sign those papers to allow you to undergo this gender change.
And I had no idea, actually, that they had this conversation or just what they were telling to my mom and dad. I don't really know how I would have responded if I was in the room and I heard that. I don't know if I would have believed it. I don't know if I would have said, no, that's not true. I don't feel that way about myself. But my mom and dad, of course, they felt like there was no other option for me because they weren't given any other option by the doctors who were supposed to help us.
Yeah, man. So obviously then they've signed off, the decision's made, and you undergo the gender change transition. Do you want to just briefly tell us what that looks like?
It was a very expedited process. It was very quick. I started on a course of puberty blockers for about a year. They used a medication called Lupron. It really sucked. Like, every single part of it, from the way that it was administered, like, it was like a massive needle, a massive shot into, like, either one of my gluteal muscles, my butts. And the effects were just awful. Like, it really was like a childhood onset menopause that it gave me. So I was experiencing, like, hot flashes. I was, like, uncomfortably hot and sweaty throughout the day. I was very itchy and tingly. I was very lethargic. It basically zapped my body of all of its energy. And emotionally, I was very numb, at least during that initial month that I was on it alone. And then they put me on testosterone shots, weekly testosterone shots, pretty much right after that period. It was an entirely different drug. It was like I had all my energy back. It was sort of like a stimulant in terms of how it affected me emotionally and psychologically. And it was very powerful. The physical effects came very quickly. And I started to develop facial hair, like the hair pretty much all over my body, like even like my eyelashes and my eyebrows and the hair on top of my head and my scalp just got so much thicker. I started to develop a lot of muscle. I started losing a little bit of weight. And it was, as a girl, when you're growing up, especially when you're going through those first few phases of puberty, you feel like you have no control over your body. And that is a normal developmental feeling to have. And this is a very unhealthy means of me feeling like I could develop that sort of control over myself with the muscle mass and the loss of fat in my body. It was very much like a maladaptive coping mechanism for me, right, for things that were completely normal in my life. And
you're 12 years old when this is going on?
I was 13 now.
13.
And I was going, I was on it for a few months before going into high school, and eventually by the time that I was in high school, in my teen years, I looked pretty much like any other teenage boy. So other than people who I had previously gone to school with, nobody around me had any clue, actually, that I was really a girl. So I was being socialized into the role of a young man. I was using male locker room and restroom facilities, which was nasty. I do not recommend. Probably one of the most regrettable parts of my transition. But pretty much everybody around me saw me as a boy. And at first it was very exciting. I basically had created a new life and a new identity for myself. And everything was so novel, and I thought, well, this is the life that I was supposed to live. This is who I was truly meant to be. And after those like first 2 years of high school, I really started to fall apart. The testosterone was affecting like my decision making and my emotional processing. So I really fell into like this deep depression. I was getting into a lot of dangerous situations.
Yeah.
By using the male restrooms, like if anybody knew that I was actually a girl, I could have been putting myself in some serious danger.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I started to realize just how unnatural all of this really was, that I wasn't really fit for this role, that I never would be, because I never actually would become a boy, no matter what drugs I was given, no matter how the doctors treated me. I would never be anything other than a woman.
Yeah.
And that was something that was deeply terrifying to me, because I truly believed that somehow I was a boy and that I was going to be a young man. And that was the only choice that I had. And even though I was failing in pretty much every area of my life, I was losing friends, my relationship with my family was very strained, and I was starting to fail out of school. My doctors were still considering me for surgery, and I was allowed to undergo the surgical removal of my breast at 15 years old. And that ultimately marked the largest turning point in my transition and how I felt towards it and my attitude. Because I realized just how destructive this was especially to my body and my development into an adult. I had this epiphany that I wanted to have children of my own one day, that I wanted to fill the role of a wife in a marriage. I wanted to naturally mother children, to get pregnant, to give birth, to nurse them. And I would never be able to have that experience of breastfeeding my children. But I didn't know even if I would be able to naturally conceive or safely carry a baby to term without any major birth defects or any potential dangers for me as a pregnant mother. And that, emotionally, that was like hell on earth, really. That realization. I really tried to push through to the end, but I couldn't keep transitioning. I couldn't keep allowing the doctors to do this to me. I couldn't keep being a slave to something that was destroying me. And it was the hardest decision I've ever made in my life, but I broke free.
Wow.
And that was at the loss of the support of all my doctors. I had to figure out how to deal with the psychological trauma and the physical trauma and all the complications, pretty much all on my own. I haven't really been able to trust any doctors in full sense. And I lost all of my friendships pretty much within the transgender community. I lost all my friends in school that last year of high school, and it was pretty much rock bottom for me.
Man. So you made the choice, you transitioned back to being a girl, and that's, wow.
I hear the phrase transition back a lot, but I wouldn't really even consider it a transition. I'd say that it's the ultimate rejection of transition.
Yep. So, Chloe, I guess what I want to ask you then is, what is your message today? Because your story is, I want to thank you for sharing your story so honestly, and I can't even imagine, I can't even pretend to know what you've experienced. But I guess for today, what is your message? Because as you probably know, in Australia right now, this debate is raging across every state as well. What is your message, Chloe?
My message would be that there is no child, and there isn't a single child, there isn't a single man or woman either who is born in the wrong body. The issue is not the way that transgender people and people with gender dysphoria were born. It is not their body at all. It's the trauma that they've had in their life. It's the failure of the adults around them and their families. It's the psychological issues that they have that are the issue. And they are not being helped. They are not getting the help that they need from these institutions, from their own healthcare providers and doctors that they so desperately rely on.
Yeah.
We can't continue to allow these people to believe these awful lies about themselves. We need to start stepping up for them. Especially because this is something that, it's not just going on in California. It's not just going on in the US. It's something that has infected every single country in Western society. And for the sake of all of our children, all of our families, all of our communities, we need to start fighting back.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chloe, your voice and your story is a major tool or weapon in that fight, because you can't argue with someone's story, and you've been through it. And I don't really have much to say, Chloe, other than I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story, and hopefully we'll stay in touch, and we can hear more of your journey, because there's obviously a big fight ahead of you now, because you are going to take up this fight.
Thank you. And
I really just want to say well done for that.
Thank
well
you so
done,
much.
because your voice is so important. Because I'm a dad. I'm thinking about kids right now in Australia that are struggling, and they're also being presented with this as an option, that this is going to fix your problems, this is going to make you feel better, this is going to change your life for the better. But your story completely contradicts that narrative, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It goes to show that this is something that is not innate, and it's something that destroys the body. And especially, these are children that we are dealing with who are still developing physically, psychologically, emotionally, reproductively, and we're directly impeding their only pathway into adulthood. You cannot stop a child's puberty. You cannot interfere with their developments and expect them to become fully formed, functioning, happy adults later in life.
Yeah. And obviously, this is Vision Radio. We're a Christian radio station, and all of our listeners, most of them will know this. The Bible says God made them male and female. In the beginning, he created them. And it just feels to me like modern society, we're trying to say to God, you know what, God, you didn't know what you're doing. We're going to just mess with that a little bit and we're going to make things better. But throughout history, when people have got involved and tried to defy God, like the Titanic, someone wrote on the side of the Titanic, this ship is unsinkable. Even God couldn't sink it. It was first voyage, it went under. And that's kind of a metaphor to me of the modern world, that we think we can do things better than God. But I think we go back to the Bible and it's like, actually, you know what? God knew what he was doing.
Right. And it's not like my distress or my dysphoria around my sex has just completely gone away after detransitioning. But the thing that has helped me the most with it is just accepting reality and accepting that this is the way that I was made, that there is purpose in that. And there are burdens that come with it. There are burdens that come with being a woman. And it's not always easy, but it's not supposed to be easy. And that's okay, because I'm going to be able to grow through those hardships.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's a beautiful thing, ultimately.
Absolutely. And there's hardships for men and women, Chloe. There's no easy path. There's no easy road for any of us.
Yes, I learned quite a bit about some of the hardships that you men go through, especially young men. Of course, I never actually was a male as I went through this, but I got to have a little glimpse of some of the things that can make things difficult for you guys sometimes. And it's given me a unique perspective as a woman. And I feel like now I can really sympathize with the other sex. And that's something that, if there's anything good that transitioning has given me, it would be that.
Yeah. And it sounds like you worked out, or you learned how bad and smelly boys' change rooms are as well. So that was a win. But Chloe, I could listen to you all day. Like, you are so articulate and you speak so well. And as I said, your story is so real and so powerful. But I just want to thank you so much for joining us on 2020 today here at Vision Christian radio station in Brisbane, Australia.
And thank you for giving me your platform.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.